Welcome back, and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective. Like any other channel, trade shows and conferences, for many, especially in the B2B space, well, they're a lead gen tool. However, with the pandemic changing that dynamic, it's given many an opportunity to take a new look at enhancing their digital flows and even caused many to take a look at where to reallocate some of that marketing spend in order to continue to drive leads. When there are no boost demand because there are no trade shows or conferences, then where do you put your money not only to survive, but more importantly to thrive? Marty Greif is the president of SiteTuners, an author, speaker, and conference content director. And on this episode, we'll discuss trade shows and conferences, websites that don't truly function as a sales or shopping tool, reallocating budgets to things like podcasts, CFOs in reality, agile marketing, Tom Holland, political virtual events, local aquariums, a lack of respect in the distinction of some important breads of the world, and a lot more. So let's tune in to a site tuning CEO with a shark who loves the Gulf, the Atlantic, and pretty much any optimized open waters on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Marty, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective. If you would, tell us a quick synopsis of your background, your career to date, please.
Sure, I'd be happy to, Shark. It's been kind of an interesting road. I started out as a computer programmer and wound up in marketing because a vendor said, "Oh, let's see if we've got this right. You can speak about our product without drooling on yourself. You're not really a techie." Oh, yeah. I've been in marketing for the last 25 years ever since because I combine technical stuff with marketing stuff. It works.
Now, why not move towards being really a more of a MarTech type role? I know you focus on that as well, but it's a little bit of a different path as well.
Sure. Well, if I go back to that, when I moved from being a computer programmer to being in marketing, it was for software companies. The majority of my career was in software marketing, so I was there. I was retired, and 7 years ago, Tim Ash, the founder of our company, asked me if I would come on board and be the adult in charge. And yeah, well, you're laughing, but the truth of the matter is, I laughed too. I thought he was joking. It turns out he was serious.
Yeah.
And so I've been running the company for quite a while now.
That's great. Well, at least you got the right person for it, because I've never been accused of being the adult in charge of anything. But you live in one of my favorite cities. It's an area that always cracks me up that people, I think, forget about. Tampa, Florida. I went to school in the general area for a while. But what got you to Tampa? Was that where you were from?
No, I'm originally from the New York, New Jersey area. And about 20 years ago, I had left the company where I was VP of marketing, publicly traded company. I sold my stock, which basically meant I was done, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't know what to do. And a friend of mine said, "Well, why don't you come sell for us?" And the company was based out of Tampa, Florida. And so I did for 3 years and loved it. I sold. I didn't have anyone working for me. And it was wonderful. I just went out and talked to people, solved people's problems, made a lot of money. And the president of the company said, "Why don't you come down and be our VP of marketing?" And after 7 times of saying no and the offer keep going up, I went finally, okay, I can move to Tampa. I can be bought. And I've been here ever since.
Yeah, no state income taxes, pleasant weather in the winter. It's pretty hard to beat. Plus, it's affordable compared to New York and even Miami. But I went closer to the coast. I was on the coast and spent some time there in my youth. But I love Clearwater. All those areas are just, they're beautiful little extensions of the Redneck Riviera. If you want to go all the way from Northwest Florida down, the Gulf Coast is pretty hard to beat. So.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it's certainly affordable. Like you were talking about, the house here that we bought.
Yeah.
Was the same price as the house that was up in Massachusetts where I'd lived for a little while. It's twice the size, and we have a pool, and we have a 3-car garage. You can't compare it.
No.
It was the same price.
And you're closer to sharks, which
makes
me happy. So I actually like to dive in that area, but I like diving in Clearwater, that area in particular. But went to school for a while in Bradenton. So. But anyway, the topic du jour is talking a little bit about where we're moving a lot of our dollars, especially the traditional dollar spend, to digital marketing during pandemic and post-pandemic. But talk a little bit about why you see this as a need to shift. I mean, let's help define the problem and the way you see the world today with moving trade show dollars towards digital marketing.
Well, let's start with the obvious. Trade shows aren't happening.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, Shark, but, I got to start with the obvious.
Why? Has there been something on the news about a pandemic or an illness or something? I haven't seen anything about it.
So if you think about companies that specifically in the B2B marketplace, where do they get their business from? Well, a lot of them, a lot of old school manufacturers, they have these trade show booths. Look, I had trade show booths. We used to be in the old days at things like Comdex, where what was it, a million people or hundreds of thousands of people go? It's nuts, right? And
Especially in
you
the
have
technology space in marketing.
oh yeah, you kidding me? But it's not just technology. It's automotive. It's whatever. There are all of these trade shows, even the home shows. Everything is moved, is shut down now in these trade shows. So how do you generate your business? So it's not about shifting trade show dollars because I've got money to spend. It's about shifting money to a new way to generate leads and sales for your company. So what's all of a sudden happened, Shark, is that everyone's looking at their website and saying, it's not working for me. And it's not working for them because it was never designed to do anything other than be an online static brochure. All of the marketing was happening at the trade shows. The conversations were happening at the trade shows, at the booths, in the sessions, in networking. The companies would give away bags and balls and pens, and they would do all this stuff to get their name in front of all of these attendees. And now there's no more attendees.
Yeah, it's such a great point, especially with websites. If anything, maybe at most being an endpoint for that conversation of where somebody goes to buy. But a lot of people don't go to a website, and that's we call it a storefront. But for the most part, they've fallen into the cookie cutter approach. We know we need a home page, we need a services page or products page or whatever it is. And at the very end, where you're making your purchase or maybe consuming some content that you've been roped into a blog, that's not necessarily what you think of as a shopping experience, if you will, that's
Right.
going to ultimately make you buy somebody's product or service.
Right. Well, e-commerce sites don't have the same problem that these
Exactly.
lead gen sites have. If you look at, and it
Well,
doesn't mean
everybody knows why they're going to Amazon.
yeah. So e-commerce sites don't have the same exact problem, but lead gen sites, whether it's consumer or B2B lead gen sites, we see this time and time again. They all have the same exact problem. They all do what I call the opera style of marketing. All right. You get to their website and they go, it's me, 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 me. It's all about me. Read about me, which is nuts. Okay.
And me's middle names are features and benefits.
Yes, yeah. They don't even do benefits, for crying out loud. They just do features, and instead of having a website that's targeted at why the visitor is there, they have a website that says we need to tell them all about this, and it's like, no, you don't. Okay, and that's the biggest problem that we face with these old static websites that may have been okay as you know, a reference point in the middle of an existing sales cycle, but they are not okay as a starting point and as a lead generation mechanism. And that's why they have to change from static to much more dynamic and oriented towards the visitor. And here's the key. I'll give you one key. If a website answers 3 questions, it's a winner. When someone lands on a web page, they ask themselves, am I in the right place? How do I feel about this? And what am I supposed to do here? If you answer those 3 questions, your website wins. It's that simple.
No, and that's a part two in another like 4 hour conversation we can have just on websites alone. But
Yep.
to get back to trade show dollars, one of the things that I saw, even with the podcast as well, is there's so many more brands coming to me today. And I've historically not had advertisements on my show for a variety of reasons, but they need to put their dollars somewhere because of the pandemic. They're not investing them in these trade shows, and they're saying, well, we've got the budget, we need to put it somewhere. And that's something I've seen. I'm curious what you've seen as well with conversations you've had with different brands, especially in the B2B space.
Sure. And when they come to us and they say, we've got this trade show money and we need to put it somewhere, um, as crazy as it sounds, if I can't get them off of that as their starting point, we won't take them on as a client because here's the result, the
But
reality
they
of it.
can send their checks to Kenneth at a Sharks Perspective. No,
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, fair enough. So, yeah, here's the problem. It's not about where you put your money. It's about where do you generate your leads in your business from. So they need to work backwards. If in the old days in their trade show, they would say, because hell, I managed trade shows for a long time. We
That's
all
how I
did,
met
right?
you. Yeah.
Yeah, so exactly. So you go to a trade show, you have a booth, and you have goals for your trade show marketing. At least I hope to God they had goals. We did. You say, we're going to do this trade show, we're going to spend this, we're looking to generate X number of leads. Out of those X number of leads, these will be long term, these will be short term, this is how much money. There should be a plan. Well, you got to take that same plan and say, okay, to thrive as a company, we need X number of sales. To generate X number of sales, and I don't know what their numbers are, 1 out of 10 leads become a sale, 2 out of 5, it doesn't matter. You know what your close ratio is, you know what you need, you work backwards and say, I need these many leads. And then you say, where am I going to get those leads? Am I going to get those leads in social marketing? Am I going to get those by sponsoring the Sharks podcast, which I strongly
Yeah, there
recommend?
you go.
Oh, hey, what goes around comes around. So, or am I going to get it from doing pay-per-click advertising? Where are those leads coming from now? And where do I spend my money that I would have allocated for trade show leads to, you know, digital leads, and which ones are the most worthwhile? And so here's what you have to do. Figure out what the end goal is, figure out the strategy, and test social leads, test email marketing leads, test what LinkedIn leads, test website leads. I don't care, but just test them and build out your plan. That's how you move from trade show dollars to something effective.
So, 2020, you were the MC and host for Digital Growth Unleashed, where I presented. I was told it was one of the highlights of the entire conference that most people, after seeing mine, stop. No, I'm just kidding. No, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. But, one of the things that obviously filled in the gaps for everybody during the pandemic is everybody's got a virtual conference now, just like they do podcasts. There were 1 million podcasts today. I think there were like roughly 800,000 last year. It almost feels like that with the number of virtual conferences that have sprouted up everywhere for obvious reasons, because people want to connect. It feels like the same way with a lot of Zoom calls. But with virtual conferences, especially for speakers, the lead generation play, let alone the way a sponsor would look at sponsoring a virtual conference, is much different. At most, for a virtual conference, you're going to have 2 or 3 different sponsors. At a normal trade show or conference, you're going to have, to make your money, anywhere from 10 to 50, depending on how large. I mean, it could be much bigger than that if you're talking CES or Dreamforce or something like that, or some major type conference with tens of thousands of people. But the lead generation for people at virtual conferences, it's not nearly the same. So it's a much different context of conversation sometimes, and it's also harder to follow up. Hey, let's meet for coffee later. Whereas let's just walk over here to the side after somebody speaks, or come to our booth at 123 booth and things like that. So how do you look at virtual conferences with where people may or may not need to move their money or focus?
So if I go back to in-person conferences just for a second, there's 2 pieces to it. There's the trade show booth, and there is the speakers. For the trade show booth, and I'm sure you've manned the trade show booth at some point, right?
100 years ago, but yes.
Yeah. So here's what happens. 2 bad things happen in trade show marketing. You're in your booth, and your booth personnel aren't paying attention to the people walking by, and they're sitting and they're eating, and that drives every VP or director of marketing absolutely nuts. So they're missing opportunities. The second thing that happens is the people walking by will look out of the corner of their eye at your booth, because God forbid you talk to
Yeah.
them. Oh my God, the world's going to end. Okay. So you might wind up scanning a bunch of
They're not
people,
looking at
but
me, they're looking at my tchotchkes.
yeah, they don't care. So the quality of the leads at a lot of trade shows eh, aren't all of that good. Now there's ways around that, but they aren't that good. On the speaker side, if you're a great speaker, people will come up to you, and you may generate some business out of it. But what you really get are, groupies slash fans who probably aren't the people you want to talk to. You want to talk to the people that are going to make a decision. So the problem there is you're not getting to the right people, but you will get to them over time because they'll reach out to you, right? So why did I go through that? Because in a virtual conference, what happens is you won't get a wide range of leads, but what you will get are people who are actually interested in what you had to say. So if you have quality content and you add value to somebody, which is the key to this, then what will happen is you will actually wind up with better qualified leads that will turn into business. So there's ways to do things digitally that you couldn't do anywhere near as easily in the real world, we'll say, versus the digital world. So I'm a big proponent.
You are a big proponent.
Oh yeah, very much so. Now, having said that, I miss going to conferences and
Yeah,
seeing new cities and meeting people. I'll agree to that. But from a business standpoint, when you do it right, you can get a ton of value
true.
out of virtual conferences.
True, especially if you host your own. The difference of the ones that you host on your own
Mhm.
versus the ones that, or maybe that you host and you own a different brand name versus
Mhm.
the ones that you sponsor that somebody else manages. So I will also say, though, that as a speaker, I've presented on quite a few topics, had somebody come up, and that turned into business afterwards. I've been lucky to go that way. Now, it's not just, we're not signing any contracts the day of, but it does foster a much better conversation immediately after as well. So when you look at moving those trade show dollars, what areas of digital do you typically point people to where they need to spend versus what areas do they need to avoid?
Well, it depends on what it is you're selling too.
Sure.
So if I am selling a consumer product, then I'm probably not going to be doing trade shows, virtual trade shows. Yeah, but I might be doing some series of consumer oriented webinars, podcasts. I would be sponsoring on ads on the relevant sites, anything from using pay-per-click advertising to using native advertising. There's a number of ways to be on these different sites, uh, to sponsored advertising where you've seen these sponsored articles. We've done all of these things successfully for folks, but it really depends case by case on what your value proposition and what you're trying to sell. If you're selling some B2B thing where you're a manufacturer or a software vendor or an agency like we are, then you're going to be doing virtual conferences. Now, I'm not saying you're not going to do advertising some of these others, but it's like the old story. Why do you rob banks, right, Shark? It's where the money is. All right. So you got to go to where your prospects would be. And so that's different depending upon whether you're in a consumer business or you're in a B2B business. It's all about targeting.
So if you had, let's say, $5,000 today, for example, and maybe somebody's got a 50,000 budget, for example, to spend on booths at different shows. But if you had 5,000 or 50,000 today to spend on moving what you would have spent for maybe a booth at a decent show and gotten some sponsorship out of, you said something about running those ads. Let's just take an example. Let's pick a software company. It could be home services. It could be whatever type of show. We'll kind of go with it. But if you had $5,000 to spend that you would have spent on a booth at a typical marketing or technology conference, where would your first instinct tell you to put that $5,000 or $10,000 elsewhere?
Okay, so let's try to make it even more specific. Let's say you say a software company. So let's say the software might be um, home monitoring for alarm systems.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So it's real specific. And the reason I came up with that is because you're talking about a home show. So they would have been in the home shows, right? That trade show booth, they would have had it there. So
Well,
now
there's a
what
lot of
would I do?
parallels, whether it's marketing technology or home services that have tons of shows.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, yeah. What we're talking about, sure. You're absolutely right. This is applicable across all of it, but I'll just narrow into one, and then hope the audience will take it and say, yeah, that applies to me, even though I sell X, Y, or Z, right? So in the home show concept, what I would do today is I would be marketing on Facebook, as odd as it sounds. I would have, um, I'm sorry to say this, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but with the civil unrest in the country right now, I would absolutely use fear-based ads to generate leads to off of Facebook, because that's where the people are. It's a home-based thing, as opposed to if I was selling to a business, I might be doing it on LinkedIn, right? But we're talking home-based. Uh, I would use whatever is currently going on, uh, use the pandemic, use civil unrest, whatever
Throw
it
in
is,
some
so that
political
it's relevant.
advertising as well.
Well, yeah, I might avoid that like the plague. But my point
Sure.
being is, you take what's going on out there, so it's relevant. You make it interesting. You either have to do something that is fear based, or you have to do something that is pleasure based. It's the old pain or pleasure, right? You either have to motivate people by pain or by pleasure. Those are your two choices. And so and unfortunately, there have been studies over the year that show that the pain based and fear based stuff works about 3 to 1 times better than the pleasure based stuff. Okay. So
Yeah, but everybody's
that's what
writing
I would say.
books on being kind and empathetic and loving each other and
Right. And so if I was selling a book on how to be kind, I would say, my ad would say something along the lines of, are people are annoying you?
yeah, yeah,
Are you
yeah.
lonely?
Great point.
Here's what you need to solve that problem. Right.
The great point. So, how would you look then at podcast dollars, whether or not you were going to put money towards something like that?
Again, it goes back to the audience. What am I selling and who's the
Well,
audience for
let's
the
let's stick with
podcast?
the what we were talking about for the home services example.
Okay, so then I would find a podcast that appeals to a consumer audience. I might pick one where the audience is already, and it's going to sound crazy. So I haven't given this much thought. So Shark, I'm gonna say something wild here. I might try to find conspiracy theory podcasts where the people are likely to be a little bit more worried about bad things happening to them because they already believe the government's after them or the Democrats or the Republicans or aliens or Bigfoot, whatever they're worried about. I would actually find that kind of audience and I would sponsor on something that appealed to the kind of people that would be more likely to go, you know what, I need to protect my family and my home.
So Marty listens to the black helicopters, and aluminum foil hat podcasts.
So, well, you know what? I may be a little loony, but I
No,
will
that
tell
that's
you,
that's funny. It's smart.
yeah, we had years ago, I ran a proxy server company, and 1/5 of our clients were what we called the tinfoil hat club. Who these are people who believed that the government was spying on and aliens were listening to them. They may have been right about the government. I'm not so sure about the aliens, but we catered to them. And you know what? It's okay. We had a good solution. We solved the problem. And if they thought it was protecting them from aliens too, God bless them.
One of the reasons I said that in particular about podcasts is I think, and I talk about this a lot of time with the power of podcasting at different presentations as well, is so many people want to jump in and throw their own podcast together. And it's a much different strategy than throwing your own virtual event. Anyway, we're recording this during the back half of 2020, and the sticky question that everybody wants to really understand is how long this will sustain. God willing, we get a good vaccine and everybody goes back to normal, and we're pressing palms at, in the year 2022 or 3, we're able to see each other and hang out at trade shows like we used to. But when you look at 2021 and beyond, not just the immediate terms of 2020, but when you look at 2021 and beyond, where do you start thinking longer term? Is this going to be a permanent shift, moving a lot of those dollars to digital? Is this something that's going to sustain, or is this something just temporary?
The answer to that is yes to both. All right. And it's like, think of it this way: there are companies that survive and there are companies that thrive. And the companies that are going to thrive are the ones that are going to take this opportunity to enhance all of their digital flows, whether it's lead gen or sales or whatever it is. And they will be well positioned going forward to when we can go back to trade shows to not switch their money back from digital to trade shows, but to take additional profit that they've been making and enhance their growth by doing trade shows and digital correctly. The problem that people are having now is they haven't been doing digital correctly for forever, and now they're forced to. So the companies that thrive will do both on an ongoing basis. The companies that are just surviving will be the ones that make a I'm going to say half-ass stab at it, right? And they do some digital stuff, and they'll be thrilled when they can go back to the old ways, and they'll survive, but they're not going to be the ones that survive, that really thrive going forward. All right, digital is here to stay, and frankly, the pandemic has really pointed it out. I mean, look, I hate to sound like I'm profiting off of this, but our business has basically doubled since this pandemic has started because people need us to help them fix these problems that we're talking about. And I'll give you one other thing. We had one client, this was an existing client, said to me, and forgive me, I won't even use the right words, we're effed. That was the first line in his email to me. His revenue went to zero. And in 2 days, by doing some tweaks to his digital, we actually got him 96% of his revenue back. It took us 2 days to do. Well, you better believe he's a believer now. And since then, not only has he doubled his retainer, he's actually tripled his retainer, and he is thriving. It's all about, and it's been a wake up call. It's all about doing the right things digitally for your market to reach the right target audience. It's really simple. So we'll see.
Well, we've talked a little bit about Facebook and other social channels. We've talked a little bit about podcasts and putting money there. Any other channels that you can think of that excite you or scare the hell out of you? Is there anywhere you just say people don't invest your money right now? Because I've had conversations with too many people as of late who are more excited about the bright, shiny new object, whatever it is in context of that conversation, than they used to be. We used to complain about this for the last several years about different social media channels that run them. Now it's like people are even more adamant about that.
Mhm. Well, here's the thing. We don't look at social just as social. Social for us is social for conversion. How do you turn it into something actionable? If you're doing SEO, how do you make it actionable? Do SEO for conversion, all right, or content for conversion. So here's the answer to that. It doesn't matter if you want to do email marketing or social marketing or pay-per-click marketing or, you pick it. The road to bankruptcy is littered with half-done projects. And the problem is people do a little social, they don't do it right, and then they move on to the next
Amen.
shiny
Yeah.
object and they don't, yeah. That's the problem. It's not that they don't work. It's that people either give up too soon or they don't know what they're doing and they try thing after thing after thing. You know, any of these can work. And if you test it, you can figure out what works best for you.
So, with the clients that you work with that are moving their dollars, to borrow off that example we had earlier, do you think that they're going to continue to spend $5,000 at that trade show and then plus X number of dollars in digital? That
Well,
because at least what you're saying, and I agree with it. At least I think I do in context of it. The pandemic opened up people's eyeballs to think more about spending additionally in digital and not necessarily an if or. I'm wondering if that budget for $5,000 that they thought about for this year will be five. Let's say they had the same income to spend it on. That's obviously important if they're surviving as a business. But if they had a budget, do they need to start thinking of five for the trade show and five for digital and making the numbers up? Or do they just need to think of where do we spend $5,000 the best?
right. Well, I'm hoping that that's actually not the conversation they're having, because if they spend
Yeah, but
$5,000
your
on,
CFO's got to budget it somewhere. So he's got to know, what do I need to allocate towards these efforts to grow? Is it an additional five that you wanted to put in digital now, or is it holistically, is it 10 for everything?
okay. So let's talk about budgets, CFOs, and reality. Okay, and I'm going to throw in another term, agile marketing. So the issue here is when you're looking um, at growing your business, and there's a popular term, you and I both heard it many times, growth hacking, where we're investing on what's working.
I spoke at the
You
Growth
can choose.
Hacking Forum.
Yeah. All right. There you go. Perfect. Right. Perfect. So if the issue is how do I budget things and be a stodgy company that's got this budget, and don't get me wrong, I'm not arguing against budgets. Have your budget, but be agile. and say, all right, here's where we're going to allocate. If we spent five here before on trade shows, and we only think we're going to have five for whatever, then we're going to try budgeting five for. We're going to move that money this year to digital. If I have to plan out the following year, okay, I would just put a placeholder for whatever you think worked. If you thought your trade show worked, put the budget back on 5,000 for trade show, or put it on 5,000 for digital next year. Here's the reality: I don't care, because here's what I think will really happen if they've done this right. If they've done this right, they will see that digital marketing can be really, really effective. And what I'm hoping they're going to wind up doing is not spending $5,000 the following year on trade shows when trade show comes back. I hope they're going to spend 15,000 or 20,000. And here's why. Because now they figured out, if we combine digital marketing with trade show marketing and put the two together, so that when we get those leads, we actually do all the drip marketing, we do the social, all of it's tied together. It suddenly becomes an exponential play to drive revenue. So I heard what you said, Shark. I understand budgeting, but what I'm hoping happens, and what I believe will happen, I'll go back to the companies that thrive and master digital, will be able to take what they've learned with digital, apply it to what they're doing in person at trade shows, and master both.
No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's something I preach and moan about all the time, talking about a more holistic view, not just a channel view. But sometimes your CFO wants to look at a last click on stuff, and then it becomes an argument of trying to explain the bigger picture to them. So it's really important to the business leaders and marketers out there to explain why that story is needed even more now. Not just that it's not the CFO's fault. Sometimes, if you're wanting money, you've got to explain where it converts, and you're just going to have to explain the holistic view a lot better. So you and I know each other through the conferences. You personally, which do you enjoy doing now based on what you were saying? Do you enjoy speaking as a speaker? Do you enjoy speaking more on virtual conferences or speaking in person at a live event?
Oh, again, a tough question. You love to ask the tough questions. I like both for different reasons. I love speaking in person. I love the energy you get from the audience. I love seeing the reactions from people. I love traveling. I really get my juices flowing from that. From a pure business perspective, it's a lot easier to do virtual conference, meeting, webinar, virtual conference over and over again. I can pack in so much more in my day.
Yeah.
So from a business perspective, I hate to say
Well,
it,
there's zero
virtual wins.
cost, and you can be lazy and wear flip flops or slippers or Crocs. I mean, it's completely
Sure,
different. But
sure.
no, I wouldn't trade it for the world. I would rather speak in person any day of the week and twice on Sunday. But what I do love about virtual conferences and virtual trade shows, at least, is it has totally, with the pandemic, inspired me to rethink every virtual presentation that I give today. And I don't even think I did that early on, but it has so locked me in now to thinking about doing things with digital confetti, if you will. I mean, it's like when you watch the presentations done on the national political conventions, it makes you wonder, did any of them actually watch what was happening with every conference that's gone on during the pandemic? Because it doesn't feel that way. It seems like at most it's just somebody on another boring Zoom call. But when you see some of these speakers that still get a ton of business and rely on the speaking business to generate referrals and business, you see them really upping their game. And I think that's exciting for people as well. So plus I want to have an excuse to go on another diving trip to San Diego or Clearwater or Miami or, Jupiter or any of those places. I love to swim with sharks. So that's a lot more fun to do.
Well, my only comment to all of that is, you're more the exception than the rule itself. You are an outstanding speaker, and you always prepare your content. And the fact that you're using this as an opportunity to retool and make it even better, I can't even imagine what you're going to be like, in the next, events where you're in person. I mean, you're starting from a great place, and you're telling me you're going to make it better. I'll go to a conference just to watch
Well,
you.
it's a lot easier to do this virtually. I've been trying to think of more ways to bring in sharks into the in-person experience. It's extremely easy to do that on a Zoom background or something like that. So this at least has been a little more fun to do for Shiggles than others. But anyway, so you're also an author that released a book during the pandemic when you didn't have a chance to go put the book out in front of everybody's hands in person. Did that change how you look to market the book as well, and where you move your own dollars and your marketing mindset to help push the book as well?
So this book took me 4 years. Okay. I mean, literally took me 4 years. Okay. And through massive number of rewrites and editing process and all that. And, I never meant to market the book. The book is meant to market
Then
us.
you waited
So it's
until
kind
a pandemic to release it.
of, yeah. Yeah. So the book was really, it's actually, the book was designed, oh, you're going to love this. The book was designed to hand out at trade shows.
Yeah, perfect.
That's the reality of it. So, so we haven't quite figured out what to do with it, other than now that I'm a published author, and we can have links to that, that I'm a published author. It actually is generating more business for the agency.
It's, I wish more people would take advantage of the time they've had at home to do things like that as well. So, Marty, I asked this of everybody that's been on my show. The last time I was in Tampa, I did do a dive off Clearwater, saw several beautiful little sharks, little sand tiger sharks that were lovely and fun to swim with, as well as a few others. But what is your favorite kind of shark and why?
What is my favorite kind of shark and why? My favorite kind of shark is one at the aquarium behind glass, so they're separated from me. Okay.
By the way,
I've
Tampa has a
Yeah.
fantastic aquarium in a really nice area in downtown Tampa.
Yes, it does, and I've been there many times. I've actually uh, snorkeled. I'm not a diver, but I do snorkel, and I have snorkeled and seen sharks. But the thing that scared me more than a shark was actually a barracuda. I was swimming in, I think it was Guadalupe, and I had my little fins on and my little snorkel, and I look over at this thing with all these teeth, and he's looking at me, and I'm looking at him, and I'm thinking, hmm, I think he's hungry. I was not happy.
Yeah, it's not the heaviest population of sharks. You see a lot more on the East Coast, but it is still a good area. The water's fantastic. So
Oh
anyway,
yeah, we see them. Yeah, we see them all the time. You see them actually. We see them on the news when there's sharks. They actually show them on the
yeah.
news here on the Tampa stations.
Well, Marty, it's that special time in the show. Are you ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions that you're going to be asked today?
Not even remotely ready.
That's perfect. So, number one is spending money in a perfect world. We're making a Sophie's choice here. Spending money on a trade show or spending the same amount in digital dollars, your channel, your choice.
Oh, that's simple. It's digital marketing. It's not even a question.
Perfect.
What is so?
Number two, the beaches of West Florida, where you are, or the beaches of East Florida.
Oh, West Florida. The beaches here are prettier, and there's less rip currents. The beaches on the East Coast have from the Atlantic are much rougher, and it's much calmer here. So, I'm a calm kind of
Well,
guy.
the water on the West Coast is like bath water. It's so warm. It feels
Yep.
fantastic compared to the Atlantic. So, number three, Spider-Man or Iron Man?
Well, today I'm going to say Spider-Man because Tom Holland, I get the biggest kick out of him
Yeah.
playing Spider-Man. So
Yeah,
that's
he actually
why.
they did a very good job, and Tom Holland looks better when they weaved him into the phenomenal Avengers franchise as opposed to
Yep.
starting from scratch like they've done with every other one of them. So, all right, number four, your advertising dollars, Facebook or Instagram?
That's a tough question to answer. A part of it has to do with what the market is. For me, um, it's neither. For our business, it would be more like LinkedIn for B2B. But if I
But
was
I'm
a
asking the
consumer
tough
brand,
questions.
yeah, I know. But I know. So if it was me, if I had to pick between the two for my business, which would I pick? I'd pick Facebook.
And the sad thing is, everybody doesn't think about Facebook or Instagram or even LinkedIn. So many are like, what can we do on TikTok? Which is a whole different conversation. Number five, and the most interesting and important question that you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread?
Okay, now I'm going to show that I'm from the North. What's the difference between them exactly? I'm a Yankee. What can I tell
Uh,
you?
we'll pick one or the other because this show has just completely gone off the rails.
I'm sorry. Uh, biscuits, of course.
Okay. All right, Marty, where can people find out more about you, the SiteTuners team, where to invest those trade show dollars, or possibly later send me checks to invest on the podcast?
Well, if they're going to forward checks for you, I'd say they should probably just send them directly to
Okay.
you. But if they want to find out about SiteTuners, they just need to go to www.sitetuners.com, and they can even book an appointment with one of us right on the top right-hand corner.
Awesome. Marty, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective.
Thank you.
So there was my conversation with Marty Greif, the president of SiteTuners, an author, speaker, and conference content director. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from my conversation with him. First, such a fascinating topic to me. When you think about your own website, especially if it's a lead gen tool for B2B or B2C, does it really take someone down a lead gen path? Most of the time, people look at traffic and then maybe optimize, but take away a channel driving traffic to it like paid search or social, or take away a bigger lead gen tool in B2B like trade shows and conferences. Then all you may have left is your website, at least for many in the service related businesses. Even if you're great in social, it's likely that you're still driving some bigger definition, if you will, from that channel to your website. So the issue that he says he sees quite regularly is the opera problem of me, 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 me. And that's a lot of old static websites that are a reference point of the funnel, telling, your me story, but not as a starting point as a lead generation mechanism when they need to be less static and more dynamic to the visitor. He asks that a site answer these 3 questions to the visitor. 1, am I in the right place? 2, how do I feel about this? And 3, what am I supposed to do here? So many websites do not answer those questions correctly. Second, where you put your money or reallocate it when considering if you're moving it from one channel to another or having one plucked out of your hands because of a pandemic, for example, should be looking at your target first, your target audience, your target customer. And you've simply got to test a lot of channels that you may or may not have before, whether that's more social like with LinkedIn or podcast promotion and sponsorship, your own virtual conference, etc. Focus on your target customer first, figure out where they are and where they're moving to go to fix their problems now. Third, love this point that he made. There are companies that survive and those that thrive, and the companies that are going to thrive are the ones that are taking the opportunity to enhance all of their digital flows. So many people have been doing this incorrectly for a very long time now, and now you're forced to change things, so make sure you take the opportunity. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. It's time for me to swim with sharks again, but I prefer the ones in person. So join us in the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.